I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the mysterious disappearance and murder of mother of two, Suzanne Morphew. Her husband, Barry, has been charged with her murder, but has proclaimed his innocence. Charges were dismissed the first time he was arrested. Will these new charges stick? Here's the story. On Mother's Day, May 10th, 2020, Suzanne Morphew vanished from her home in Chaffee County, Colorado. Her bike was found abandoned on a remote trail, but Suzanne was gone without a trace. What began as a missing persons case soon spiraled into a complex investigation riddled with secrets, suspicion, and heartbreak. Suzanne, a beloved mother of two, had been texting a lover and expressing fears about her troubled marriage. Her husband, Barry Morphew, insisted she'd been taken by a mountain lion. But investigators uncovered deleted messages, GPS data, and inconsistencies in his story. In 2021, Barry was arrested and charged with her murder, but with no body, insufficient evidence, and ethical issues connected to the prosecutor, the case was dismissed without prejudice. Then, in a shocking turn, in September of 2023, Suzanne's remains were discovered in a shallow grave nearly 40 miles from where she disappeared. Now, almost 2 years later, her husband Barry has once again been charged with her murder. This has been a real true crime mystery throughout. I mean, it began with a missing mom, goes missing on Mother's Day of all days. Like, where is she? And then there are some certain clues that are followed. And then all the twists and turns of the investigation and prosecution of the case have brought us to this moment. And a huge development with the DA making this huge announcement. Take a listen.
I can announce today that the 12th Judicial District Grand Jury returned an indictment. The grand jury has indicted Barry Morphew on the single count of murder in the first degree. Law enforcement, the Chaffee County community, and Colorado as a whole has never stopped fighting for justice for Suzanne.
And remember, she has to say never stop fighting because there were charges. He was brought into court. He was locked up. All that, we were moving towards a trial, and then everything happened and the charges were dismissed, which brings us to the first question in our investigation tonight. Why was Barry Morphew re-indicted? What has changed in this investigation and in this case? Here to help answer that question, Colorado-based attorney Stephen Longo and retired homicide detective Vince Velasquez. You know him from ATL Homicide, but he is set to premiere a new show called The Murder Man on YouTube, and we are all looking forward to that. Make sure you check it out, folks, The Murder Man. Vince Velasquez, great to have you here as well. Okay, let me start with you, though, Stephen, on the legal twists and turns here with the indictment, the re-indictment, etc. It seems there were big problems with the original prosecutor and the way they were going about prosecuting this case.
Yes, Vinny, thank you for having me. You hit the nail on the head. The biggest issue with why this case is being re-indicted is because the first prosecution, to put it plainly, fumbled the case, okay? They had a case based on circumstantial evidence to begin with, but the district attorney, Lindsay Stanley, committed a number of ethical violations. Mind you, she was newly elected at the time. So following her being elected, this is her first big high-profile case, and she comes out of the gate by committing what we call extrajudicial statements to the press, meaning prejudicial statements that might make it so Mr. Morphew won't be allowed to have a fair trial. She was cited for improper supervision. Her office failed to make proper disclosures, resulting just months before trial 11 of their 16 expert witnesses were not going to be allowed to testify. Following that, she tried to have the judge who made that ruling investigated in an attempt to get a recusal. So following all that, just months before trial, to save face and try to save the case maybe for another day, the charges were ultimately dismissed.
Vince, this is one of those cases, right, where the investigators do all the work and then the lawyers totally bungle it. But I want you to take a listen to some of the key evidence, I believe, for this re-indictment that is really helping, may help prosecutors get a conviction here if the jury believes it. Take a listen as Cody Thomas walks us through it.
In the grand jury indictment, the district attorney explains the drugs found in Suzanne Morphew's bones. It's, quote, a chemical mixture known as BAM, or the combination of butyphenol, azaparone, and medetomidine. The chief toxicologist tested Suzanne Morphew's bone marrow for the presence of BAM. All three of the individual chemicals that comprise BAM were present. The coroner's office determined cause of death and manner of death as follows: homicide by unspecified means in the setting of BAM intoxication. BAM could only be obtained by prescription from a veterinarian. BAM must be administered into the bloodstream through intravenous or intramuscular injection. BAM does not cause sedation instantaneously, but takes several minutes to take effect. BAM is designed not to be lethal and comes with reversal agents in the prescription kit. However, BAM is not FDA approved for any human use. The compound would render the recipient wholly immobile, vulnerable, and unable to resist any constrictions to the recipient's ability to breathe. Records were obtained for BAM prescriptions related to Barry Morphew. The prescription records show that when Suzanne Morphew disappeared, only one private citizen living in that entire area of the state had access to BAM, Barry Morphew. Barry Morphew used BAM to sedate and transport deer on his deer farm. Barry Morphew admitted to using BAM in both Indiana and Colorado. Specifically, he admitted to using BAM in Colorado as recently as April of 2020, stating that at that time he had tranquilized a deer from the breezeway of the Morphew residence.
Vince, sounds to me like prosecutors believe that he hunted down his own wife with this BAM.
Yeah, this is literally the proverbial smoking gun. With all of the circumstantial evidence already that we know of that would have been presented in the first trial that still exists today, and that's the great thing about circumstantial evidence, it never goes away. This is the smoking gun. In her bones, this animal tranquilizer is found, and then they find this same tranquilizer at his house, and he is, authorized to have it. This is one of those things that, as a homicide detective, this is like a gift from the homicide gods.
Another part of it is the darts, and I'm wondering here, how on earth, and Stephen Longo, from your perspective, what do you think prosecutors are going to argue happened here? Like, how are they going to tell a story of exactly how he did it, or just put the pieces out there and say, we don't know how he did it, but this is what he used?
Yeah, I think the theory from the former prosecution was that he tranquilized her with an unknown agent, chased her around the house as it took effect, and then moved her body initially to where he committed the murder, whether that was in the home or somewhere else. And I think, to Vince's point, this is that smoking gun. It is no longer a mysterious agent or chemical. It is a trifecta of sedatives known as BAM that is sold by one private company in the United States that is heavily regulated, and he is the only private citizen who has access to it in the state of Colorado. This completely fills in the kind of any holes the defense would have to make as to the use of a sedative. And again, the body being found was the big component for this new prosecution to find that evidence.
Yeah, that was so crucial, Vince, actually being able to track down Suzanne's remains and be able to extract this type of evidence.
Yeah, it's crazy. So prosecuting a case without a body, I've never had it. In the many years I worked homicide, I had cases that had a ton of circumstantial evidence, but prosecutors are really hesitant on going to trial for that, and it's difficult. And it's no surprise that they dismissed this case without prejudice, hoping that either find her body or more evidence, and they did. They did exactly that. And the fact that they found her body, that is step number one. And then manner, cause of death, ruled a homicide, and then this animal tranquilizer found in her bones. This really seals the deal. Add that with all the text messages, the fact that their marriage was in shambles, that she was leaving him, having an affair, all of these things the jury's going to hear. This is great evidence, and it proves, or at least it shows that, you know, this guy is likely responsible for her death.
You know, Stephen, when you think about what happened first time around, they didn't have all of this evidence. They've got more second time around. It's almost as if the district attorney screwing up the case may actually help the prosecution. Is there any sort of limitations that the prosecution will have second time around here because of what happened first time around?
No, there will be no limitations. I think one of the differences we'll see in this, obviously Ann Kelly is lead prosecutor for the district attorney's office. Because the body was found in the San Luis Valley, they changed venue from Chaffee County down to Alamosa, which will be a little bit different and ultimately won't have much of an impact other than getting another shot with more evidence, with a body. And I think Ann Kelly's going to do a great job. She's going to be a hard-nosed, tough, and by-the-book prosecutor and likely bring this one home.
Vince, how about making that transition from it being a missing persons case to then turning into a homicide case? And I know different jurisdictions handle that differently. Is there some nuance to that?
I mean, there could be, but I think, you know, from the onset, I think everybody was suspicious of Barry. You know, looking at the video you just showed, when he's on the news talking about literally telling the news that he is, you know, missing his wife. If anybody's out there, you know, let her go, you know, come home safely. If you look at his face while he's saying these things, he's shaking his head no. That's nonverbal incongruence. It's not matching up. His words and his body language are not matching up. From the beginning, everybody suspected Barry of having something to do with his missing wife. So if you can't find a body, you don't know exactly what happened to her, then you have to rely, or the prosecutors have to rely on the circumstances to try and prove a homicide. It's extremely difficult. The fact that they found her body, that kick-started this thing right back up. And that's what we're talking about today. From what I've read, this evidence is very strong, and I think the jury's going to come back with a guilty verdict.
All right, Stephen, thank you so much. Vince is going to stick around. Coming up next, what was the status of Barry and Suzanne's relationship?
Oh, Suzanne, if anyone is out there that can hear this, that has you, please, we'll do whatever it takes to bring you back.
Brutal murders of 4 University of Idaho students.
Oh my God, this doesn't happen here.
Detectives arrested 28-year-old Brian Kohlberger.
You could tell there was some off about him.
He was stalking them. He was hunting them.
Forget about motive. We don't even have a connection.
This trial will be on Court TV.
And I pray that we have justice.
The Idaho College Student Murders Trial. Live coverage begins this August, only on Court TV.
Oh, Suzanne, if anyone is out there that can hear this, that has you, please, we'll do whatever it takes to bring you back. We love you, we miss you, your girls need you.
That was Barry Morphew making a plea and for the return of his wife. That's when Suzanne, his wife, was still missing before her body was found several years later, about 40 miles away from their home. A lot of people looked at that, including Vince Velasquez in our first segment, said, well, what's really going on here? Is he a loving husband? Well, in his early interviews, he described his relationship with Suzanne was really the best, and that the day that she went missing, they had been having a wonderful weekend. Well, take a listen, because Matt Johnson took a closer look at what was going on in the relationship between Barry and Suzanne Morphew.
Barry owned a landscaping business, and Suzanne was a stay-at-home mother who was being treated for cancer. The couple lived in Maysville, Colorado, about 2.5 hours southwest of Denver. According to the arrest affidavit, the Morphews' marriage was falling apart. She was having an affair and believed that he was cheating too. The week before she disappeared, she texted him that she was done with him, and they had to resolve their situation civilly. They also had a history of fights over money, and he was pressuring Suzanne to loan him thousands of dollars.
So that brings us to the next question in our investigation, and it's about Suzanne and Barry. What was the status of Barry and Suzanne's relationship? Always crucial in cases that we cover here on Court TV involving allegations of spousal murder. Helping us out with our investigation, retired homicide detective Vince Velasquez. Vince, let's talk about this. When you start investigating a case like this, how much do you get into what's going on in the relationship versus looking for, physical evidence or digital evidence?
It's so important to understand what the dynamics of that relationship is, especially with a missing spouse. I mean, look, text messages, and all these other things that were going on are very important. But a confession, you don't really need a confession. A text message or the relationship can tell the story. So as a homicide detective, looking at a tumultuous relationship between a husband and wife, and all of a sudden she shows up missing, I want to talk to the friends. I want to talk to family members. I want to talk to neighbors to get a real good feel of what was going on. I've had cases like this, and the husband portrays the marriage as nothing but rose petals and sunshine and rainbows, when after the investigation or halfway through it, I'm starting to learn that things were not exactly what they seemed. In this case, she clearly was leaving her husband. That text message she sent him on May 6th, I think 4 days before she went missing, was literally, I'm done. And if it doesn't get any clearer than that, of a bad relationship, a bad marriage, and then 4 days later, his wife goes missing. And he's trying to paint the picture that everything was nice and everything was cozy within the relationship.
Let's bring in another guest helping us out, Michelle Pence. She's the host of the Crime Shack podcast. Michelle, thanks so much for being here. How would you describe the relationship between Suzanne and Barry Morphew before she went missing?
Well, according to Barry Morphew, it was great. But that was far from the truth. So from the outside, the Morphews look like the picture-perfect family. Barry and Susan were a stunning couple. They had 2 beautiful daughters, lived in a $1 million home in a nice, quaint, small mountain town in Colorado. But that was far from the truth. Everything inside the Morphew home was crumbling. The marriage had been disintegrating for several years, so much so that Suzanne had texted her sister and her friends telling them that Barry was both emotionally and physically abusive to her and that she did not feel safe being around him.
Wow.
Barry even told, I'm sorry, yeah.
No, continue, please continue.
Yeah, just days before Suzanne went missing, she had texted her husband telling him that she didn't care what he was doing, that they were basically done, that their marriage was over, and they had to figure out how to end it civilly. On top of all that, Suzanne had been having a secret affair with a high school buddy for 2 years. So at this point, Barry knew that the marriage was over. Suzanne was trying to work up the courage to leave him, and he no longer had control over the situation.
You mentioned that Suzanne was getting together with this high school friend. Take a look at this. At a hearing in 2021, attorneys on both sides discussed some of the evidence, including data from a spy pen. A spy pen. The pen revealed to investigators that Suzanne was having this affair for 2 years. It was actually Suzanne's pen. She had purchased it to record audio, hoping to catch Barry having an affair. Instead, that spy pen recorded audio capturing Suzanne talking on the phone to her lover. She traveled out of state at least 6 times to meet up with him. The man in Michigan had a wife and 6 children. And it took investigators a while to find him, Vince, because I'm sure he wanted no part of what was happening in Colorado. But investigators have cleared him, and that's another important part of the investigation, Vince. You've got to clear the man who's having the affair, because the defense would love to point the finger at him.
And they're going to do that. No matter whether the prosecution or the detectives cleared him, that's going to be a point of contention. It's likely going to be the defense at trial. There's another person involved that has skin in the game, so to speak, and that's the likely person they're going to point to. I mean, look, the text messages to her husband are golden. Sometimes text messages are even better than DNA. It gives the victim a voice from beyond the grave. It gives us a snapshot into what was going on. It was clear that she was done with this relationship. And as far as this other person is concerned, I'm sure he was vetted, and there's no, animosity. There was no problems with them. Everything points back to her husband, Barry. So, but this is going to be an area where the defense is going to focus on. That's my prediction. They're going to look at this other person and try to bring doubt to the jury that it was the other guy, the guy she was having an affair with, that actually killed her.
You know, Michelle, I think it's a clear sign that things are over when one member of the marriage or one of the spouses decides to buy a spy pen. That's a clear sign that things are over.
Absolutely. 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 And she intended it to catch her husband in an affair, but inadvertently she was caught in the affair. So, yeah.
Yeah, it also captured him listening to an episode of Forensic Files, by the way. The episode involved someone who disappeared, was abducted riding their bike, and that was the first part of this mystery, was her bike was missing that day. Vince Velasquez, Murder Man on YouTube. We're all going to check it out. Thank you so much. Michelle is going to stick around. Up next, what happened the day Suzanne disappeared? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the mysterious disappearance and death of Suzanne Morphew, a mother of two who disappeared on Mother's Day sometime after sending a text message to her lover. Here's the story. Mother's Day 2020 dawned with eerie silence in the mountains of Colorado. Suzanne Morphew, radiant and athletic, vanished without a trace after a supposed bike ride near her Chaffee County home. Her bicycle was found tossed in a ravine, intact, yet haunting. As days turned into months, a desperate search unfolded across rugged terrain. Drones, dogs, and volunteers combed the wilderness. But Suzanne's body remained hidden. Her daughters, torn between grief and loyalty, stood by their father, Barry Morphew, who insisted she was taken by a wild animal. Yet, whispers of marital tension, secret messages, and GPS data began to surface. In 2021, Barry was arrested for her murder, but the charges were dropped after the prosecutor ran into ethical problems connected to the case. Then in September of 2023, a grim discovery. Suzanne's remains were found buried in a shallow grave 40 miles away. The news shattered her daughters, reopening wounds once thought to be healing. Now, almost 2 years later, Barry Morphew has been re-indicted for his wife's murder. This case taking on twists and turns that, each time something happens, it's very, very unexpected. Sometimes these things run a normal course. This one has not. But here we are. Barry Morphew has been re-indicted. So now he is preparing and prosecutors are preparing for trial. When we get a case like this, I always like to look at the timeline. The timeline to me is so important, so significant in trying to understand what happened, who had an opportunity to do something to Suzanne Morphew. Where was everyone on the day? So let's take a look at this timeline. And we begin the timeline before she disappears, May 6th. And Barry took a screenshot of a text from Suzanne that said, "I'm done, and we just need to figure this out civilly." Big piece of evidence talking about what's going on in that relationship. May 9th, 2022, 11, Suzanne's last known electronic message is 32 minutes before Barry got home from work that day. May 10th, 2020, 5 a.m., early in the morning, Barry says he left for a work trip to Broomfield, Colorado. May 10th, 2020, 9:06 a.m., Barry is seen throwing away items in separate trash cans in Broomfield. May 10th, 2020, 5:46 p.m., Suzanne is reported missing from her home in Salida, Colorado, by a neighbor. Got to fill in some blanks here, and that brings us to the next question in our investigation. What happened the day Suzanne disappeared? What was going on? Here to help answer that question, retired police commander Mike King. He's also the host of the podcast Profiling Evil and the author of the new book Wolves in Sheep's Clothing. And still with us, Michelle Pence, host of the Crime Shack podcast. All right, Mike, what was happening that day? I mean, he's getting up to go to work. It's Mother's Day, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy, Vinny. I guess that's where the prosecution's going to really have to show what is normal behavior. If every Mother's Day in the entire marriage he's off working, maybe they've got something. But this is kind of peculiar. It's also kind of peculiar that this happens at a time when the girls are sent away. If I remember right, I think the girls were at a church camp, were on the bus coming home when they started calling their mom and trying to wish her happy Mother's Day, which led them to speak to him. But as you start looking at this thing from a behavioral standpoint, because we're really good at looking at the forensic evidence and the admissions, or perhaps some people may say confessions, but we start to develop a pretty clear picture. But when we add the behavior into this and we see things, what's normal behavior and what's a little bit outside of the scope of normal. And you know what? Even if we give it to him that it's normal for him to go to the job site at 5 a.m. and drive to Denver and make his employees come to Denver, which frankly, I think there's also a record that indicates that those employees were notified rather short term that, hey, we got to go to work tomorrow. But then to show up at that hotel room and immediately take off and start going to different dumpsters, I think as many as 5 dumpsters, including potentially one along the way. He either had to do his own housekeeping in the room, or he's got something that he's trying to get rid of. Now, his argument is, I keep a really dirty truck, and I decided after getting up at 5 a.m. that now's the time to clean my truck. But again, those are things that I really want to see body camera footage inside his truck, whether that truck was clean or whether he was disposing of something that was really important. And then we just keep piling on more and more information, like when the phone call comes in, his memory of being out at the job site, when in reality his phone is showing him in the hotel room, and I believe the hotel cameras are showing him at the hotel room. All of this starts to paint a behavioral picture that doesn't match up with what's verbally being testified against, and then we start adding the forensics that starts impeaching the verbal testimony.
Yeah, and what's fascinating, it starts as a missing persons case, and he is speaking. He's not, I'm not talking, I'm getting a lawyer. No, he is speaking because my wife is missing. We need to find her. Michelle.
Vinny, and
go ahead.
I just wanted to add one thing quickly, and that was that he also, when he does finally get the call, he throws the neighbor under the bus and says, hey, go over and check, and make sure you check for her bike and her riding clothes. I mean, how many times have we seen people set up others? Now, it very well may have been exactly what he did out of an innocent response, but all of those things starting to pile together become just so suspicious, and I'm sorry for cutting back in.
Yeah, no problem at all. Michelle, I want to take a look at a map just so folks can understand where the 3 important locations are here as referencing that day. You've got the Morphew home on the left. It's 3-hour drive from home to go to Broomfield, which is this alleged business trip on Mother's Day early morning. That's to the north. And then from there, you drive 3.5 hours south, or about an hour from the Morphew home southeast, and that's where her remains were found. So it seems that the locations are significant as well. And what prosecutors will have to do is figure out how he gets, to prove this case, how he gets down to the county where she is found, which is 3.5 hours from where he says he went that day.
Right. And I want to add to this timeline, one thing that wasn't mentioned was the day before she went missing, which I think is a huge piece of the evidence. The day before she went missing, her phone stopped pinging. It was around, I believe, 2:15 in the afternoon. What's significant about that is that day on May 9th, Barry shut off his phone, and this will be provided as part of the evidence, I believe, from the prosecution. But he turned his phone on airplane mode for almost 8 hours that afternoon, from about 2:15 to about 10 o'clock at night on May 9th. What was he doing for those 8 hours, and who turns their phone on airplane mode in the middle of the afternoon? So that will be a significant piece of time where I believe it allowed him to basically take care of her body, bury it wherever he needed to bury it, and cover up evidence and prepare to dispose of the evidence, as Mike mentioned, through those various dumpsters the next day. So that is a significant piece. In addition to that, they have data from Barry's vehicle, which is going to be significant. They can pull ALCA, which I had no idea before this information came out, that they can show when you opened your car doors, when you closed your car doors. So they have that information. They know that Barry's car doors opened at night after he told investigators he went to sleep at 8 p.m. They show that his car doors opened at 9:30 p.m. In addition to that, they show his vehicle being put in reverse, going closer to the home at night. This is supposed to be after he went to sleep that night, or after he told investigators he went to sleep. So I think the cell phone data, tracing his whereabouts, shutting off specific times, very significant times during May 9th as well as May 10th, the car data, bringing that in, the dumpster information, and now we have a body on top of that has, as it shows on the screen, the BAM drugs, the butorphanol, azaparone, and medetomidine. So those are significant. Now they have very significant both circumstantial and physical evidence in this case.
Yeah, I was just thinking, last week I did put my phone in airplane mode, Mike, because I was on an airplane.
Yeah,
exactly.
The only other time I can think of is I snuck into Winchell's Donuts once, and I didn't want my wife to know. But it's always when you're doing something wrong that you happen to turn it off, or you're on an airplane.
Yeah, exactly. And the trips, to the dumpsters, to me, we've seen that again in the Dulas case out of Connecticut, and that never went to trial because he took his own life. But that's crucial evidence. That is something that a juror can understand very easily. Like, you live in a house, you have a construction site and all this other stuff, yet you're driving around town dumping garbage? Come on.
Yeah, I'm with you, Vinny. I mean, this is going to be really critical that the prosecution puts it across about how many of you go and get up at 5 a.m., drive to a hotel and immediately start going on dumpster runs. I think we can really put this into terms that make sense to a jury, because that's just not normal behavior. And unless there's just some incredible way to explain that, it becomes awfully suspicious.
It absolutely does. Want to thank Michelle Pence, host of the Crime Shack podcast. Great to have you on the program. We'll be speaking a lot. And Mike King's going to stick around. Still to come, what role will the Morphew daughters play in this trial?
Law enforcement has never stopped working to obtain justice.
Coming soon to Court TV.
It's the biggest story that we're covering.
These murders have shaken our community.
He is the boogeyman.
So many eyes have been on Donna Adelson from the beginning. It's terrible. A social media sensation, now a suspected killer.
Why do you have something against me?
She wrote a children's book about her husband's death. Now she's accused of killing him.
The high-stakes trials you don't want to miss. Coming soon, only on Court TV.
The investigation that has been in the hearts and minds of the people of Chaffee County, law enforcement has never stopped working to obtain justice for this mother of two, this daughter, this sister, and this beloved member of the Chaffee County community.
It's always important for the community when you have an unsolved case for it to be solved, and then when you make the arrest, you want the prosecution to stick, right? You want to solve the case and bring some sense of justice to the community. And it's important to the community. But this case is really most important to two people. And those are the daughters of Suzanne and Barry Morphew. But as you can see from this picture, they, like 90% of the children in cases like this that I've covered, are standing by the surviving parent. They do not believe that their father is responsible for this. They believe their father is 100% innocent. And that brings us to the next question in our investigation. What role will the Morphew daughters play in this trial? Helping us out, retired police commander Mike King and private investigator Lauren Vellucci. You know, Lauren, in these cases that we've covered through the years, where you have one spouse accused of murdering another spouse, whether the children are 3 years old, 10 years old, or 30 years old. Oftentimes, I would say, they just don't want to believe that one spouse, that mom could kill dad or dad could kill mom, and they will stand by the surviving spouse. That's what's happening here. What are your thoughts about how that plays in a courtroom? And my guess is they'll be permitted as victims to be in that courtroom. They're going to be sitting prominently behind dad.
Sure. And I think that, you know, look, they're in a horrible situation. Their mother was taken from them, and now their father's being accused of being the one who murdered her. So my heart goes out to these girls. It can play to the jury, absolutely. I think it just depends on how much of the evidence they have and how strong of a case it is. But again, you know, this has been several years, so we don't know what they have, you know, possibly discovered. You know, I know that when the FBI got involved in all of that, they have all of these new things. And in this new indictment, it was clear that the murder weapon that killed their mom was in the family safe. So those girls know that this was something that not everyone could access. So maybe that resonates with them. Maybe they see, you know, from the evidence in the trial and start to wonder. But either way, I mean, I can't imagine being in their shoes, but that could absolutely affect some of the jury members not wanting to send him away because the kids had lost their mother and they don't want to lose their father.
Absolutely. Here's from the indictment, Mike. An overall timeline of the week Suzanne Morphew's disappearance shows that the disappearance coincided with the daughter, the only other occupant of the Morphew residence, leaving on a pre-planned road trip out of state. Because of this, Suzanne Morphew and Barry Morphew expected to be alone at the residence beginning May 5th until either late in the day, May 10th, or into May 11th, 2020. Do you see them as potential fact witnesses in any of this, establishing timeline, talking about the relationship, and for which side?
Yeah, I don't remember them being on a witness list in the first event as this thing was going to trial before everything fell apart. But without question, they have a right as a victim to be in that courtroom, like you mentioned, Vinny. And that means they're going to, even because of that, they're going to be able to listen to other testimony unless the judge says, hey, you got to get them on immediately at the beginning if they're a prosecution witness. Now, if they happen to be a defense witness, they could potentially get to hear everybody's testimony before they get on themselves. And most often judges will fix that ahead of time, but that's going to be a real challenge, I think, and a real consideration. As you mentioned, I think it's going to be really important, if they are called as witnesses, that there's discussion around this church camp and why one was away. I thought it was both girls that were away, but regardless, to be able to establish a timeline that gave motive, or not motive, but means for Barry to be able to be alone and to pull this thing off. But then I think it's going to be important, because we don't know if the prosecution might have something up their sleeve, and maybe one or both have come forward in the last 2 years and said, man, I'm hearing some things that are causing me concern. Some public reports have indicated that one daughter was living with him in Arizona. So again, we don't know. There's also the potential that those daughters have had interaction with other people, women who Barry dated after Suzanne's disappearance, that they might have reflections, but they've already invested in going on national media saying this never happened, my father didn't do it. And frankly, the girls, in my opinion, deserve a pass. A lot of people out there are very critical of the girls siding with Barry, but holy cow, they've lost their mother, and they now have lost their father to incarceration again while he waits for trial, and potentially for the rest of his life.
Oh, absolutely. And Lauren, you look at, from the defense perspective, right? Timeline for prosecutors, giving an opportunity for this murder to take place according to the prosecution theory. But for the defense, I mean, you could take one or both daughters and take the jury inside of the home and inside the relationship without having to put Barry Morphew on the stand to talk about his relationship with his wife.
Yeah, and that's a great thing for the prosecution, because if it is true, and in fact there was domestic or emotional abuse going on in that home, studies show that that is very rarely shielded from the children. And so if they can get, that out, it's a huge, bonus points for the prosecution, but also have those children been involved in anything that, remotely resembles that. And, I just think the older they get, maybe they see those things more. They're very young in these photos. So yeah, there's a lot of possibilities here. But, God forbid them have to choose kind of a parent over the other. So I feel for them, but they could be very, very big witnesses.
Yeah, and things in the courtroom can often get tense in these situations, because you could have the girls supporting their dad who's on trial, and then they have to sit, and I've seen this in many trials, and on the other side of the aisle behind prosecutors are their aunts and uncles and cousins and potential grandparents. I don't know the status of all the family, but you have like all those folks on one side, and all of a sudden the children who not only lose mom, potentially lose dad, and then potentially lose the rest of their extended family. It's tragic just across the board. We are out of time, but I want to thank Lauren Vellucci and Mike King so much. We'll see you again really, really soon. This will not be an easy case for prosecutors. In fact, it's already been very challenging after having to dismiss charges after the first time Barry Morphew was arrested. This case is chock full of circumstantial evidence that prosecutors must use to build the case. The question is, will there be enough to erase any reasonable doubt? I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.